Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very, very pertinent, very timely, and very important episode of the Georgia Chiro Connection, brought to you by GCC. This one is so important. Docs, you've got to pay attention to this. I just had my staff listen into some of this information because it is so important. It is so relevant, and it is so we have to pay attention to this stuff right now because this is going to affect how you practice. And so today we have a very special guest that's going to be sharing a lot of information. So first and foremost, I'd like to introduce our guest, Dr. Ty Talcott.
Hey, thank you for having me today. Yeah, we're gonna go full speed ahead like drinking from a fire hose and see if we can't do some things to protect folks in Georgia.
Absolutely, we will. And if I didn't introduce myself, I'm Dr. Kathy. We have three super important topics to go over today. Number one, we're going to be talking about the No Surprises Act. And if you're surprised to even hear that term, let me tell you something. It is going to take you by surprise. This No Surprises Act, this is going to be our first topic. This is a big one. Our second topic is going to be the safe harbor laws. And then our third, we have an announcement of a new member benefit that you don't want to miss. So we're just going to jump right in. Dr. Ty, let's jump into this No Surprises Act because it is really going to catch a lot of people off guard.
I was going to say the No Surprises Act is a big surprise to a lot of chiropractors. There's no doubt about that. By and large, to bottom line it, this started January 1st of this year, and it was originally thought to be aimed at facilities, like say an emergency facility or a multiple physician facility where a patient would come in, they'd have insurance. The facility says we're in network. The patient comes in thinking everything's in network, but then all of a sudden later they get what's called a balance bill, get balance billed for maybe the radiologist fee of $500 who's not in network, or the lab fee for $800 that's not in network. And so the patient gets stuck with this surprise bill. This law is to make no more surprises. So in the beginning, when they first started structuring this, we thought, well, it probably doesn't have much to do with chiropractors because you're usually not in a facility where you've got some people in network, some people out of network, and somehow the patient gets billed and it's because of you they get billed and you're responsible for not telling them that someone was out of network. Unfortunately, there's a part two to this law, and that's all kind of in part one. Part two to this law is what are called good faith estimates. And this applies only to your cash patients or patients who have insurance and elect to not use it and are paying cash. That's pretty well going to take every chiropractor now is going to have to pay attention to this.
Right.
Almost everybody has some level of cash patients and or patients that have insurance and choose to not use their insurance and are paying cash. So when this comes about, when you've got a patient that is cash or has chosen to use cash, you have to give them, I'm trying to really bottom line, it's complex, but bottom line it, you have to give them a good faith verbal and written estimate of what their fees are going to be before you see them. And this goes so far as to say, by the law, if in fact you have, say, 10 days before the patient is coming in, you have to give them the estimate 10 days before they come in. And then there's a part of the law that says you have to give a patient a verbal and written estimate 3 days before they come in for sure. Well, we have patients that want to come in the same day. What do you do with it? Well,
or walk in and show up.
Yeah, or walk in. Then what do you do for sure? But say they call in the morning, they want to come in the afternoon. Well, you have to have it to them 3 hours before they arrive. Well, obviously, this doesn't work very well for most chiropractors. And the good news is that typically, and all I do is compliance law, HIPAA compliance, trying to keep chiropractor. I'm a chiropractor trying to keep chiropractors safe under these regulations and rules we're governed by, most of them very ridiculous, including the way this one is set up. And we don't like balance bills either. I don't like that when I go somewhere else and I get a surprise bill. I'm cool with that. But the way they want these good faith estimates done is kind of crazy. Now, when you can't meet the letter of the law, if you can meet the intent of the law, you're usually in good shape. So the intent here, think of it this way. If your office is so tight in your procedures that you never have a patient walk to your front desk and you end up telling them they have a bill of $400 or more that they didn't expect, oh, we're going to make some x-rays on you now, and then all of a sudden they come to the front desk, well, that'll be $597, and you never told them what the fee was going to be ahead of time. That could
3
be a
days
surprise.
ahead of time, though? Are you saying it has to be?
Just before they've had it done, at least.
Okay.
At least before they've had the procedure, because we can't meet every one of those stringent guidelines. But what we can do, this is all about $400 or more, a surprise bill of $400 or more. So if you can just make sure in your office that a patient never comes to your front desk and you say, that'll be $500 and they didn't expect it, and or you never send bills out that are over $400 to someone who isn't going to expect that bill. Okay, that it's a surprise to them. If you make sure that doesn't happen in your office, you'll never have a complaint filed against you. And then the chances of them finding out maybe you're not 100% perfectly compliant just doesn't exist, because there's never a complaint against you unless a peer turns you in or something. But bottom line, here's what you really need to think about. And this is what we've put together in a white paper to try to outline all of this. It's all the stuff that we have is available is free. It's one of the things we're going to talk about later on a benefit, a new member benefit. Includes a lot of the stuff I'm kind of going to pepper through here. But in that white paper, what we're recommending is that you set up tight procedures where when you're on the phone with a new patient that has not arrived yet, you find out from them, however you do it, whatever scripts you use, are you cash or are you using cash? Have insurance, but you're using cash. And if the answer is yes, then you make sure that you have a verbal estimate to them of what that initial cost is going to be at that initial visit at least. Obviously, you don't know even what you're going to recommend to them. So you can't estimate what their care and treatment is going to be, but you can estimate that first treatment to them. You can at least give them a range, if not an exact dollar amount, and then make sure you have a written copy of that estimate ready for them to sign when they come in the office door before you do anything, if you were unable to get it to them in advance. In other words, if you couldn't meet that, you have to have it to them 10 days in advance. Well, they scheduled sooner than 10 days. Well, then you have to have it 3 days in advance. Well, they scheduled sooner than 3 days. Then you got to have it 3 hours in advance. Well, if you can't meet those deadlines for any reason, make sure that you've at least told them on the phone, arrange, they sign it written before you do anything. And then when you proceed with other recommendations to this patient, maybe your report of findings, you're saying, hey, I think you're going to need 20 visits or whatever it is, that you are telling them verbally what your estimate of cost is, and that you give it to them in writing what their estimate of cost is. Now, we all know that changes. What if the patient doesn't respond and you're going to add a couple kinds of other treatment on, or you're going to refer them out, or you're going to change the amount of treatment they need? Well, you don't need 10, you're going to need 50, whatever it is.
Right. All
you have to do to meet the intent, okay, you might not be able to meet the letter every time, is just have a conversation with the patient and say, look, originally I estimated you'd probably need 5 visits on this. This is visit 4. You're not responding as fast as we thought. I think it's going to take another 5. And by the way, the cost of that is X, and then give it to them in writing. So it's not that you have to tell them a dead on amount and have to stick to that amount, but you have to tell them before they incur the bill, and they have specific time limits again before, but you can't meet those always, but you can meet the intent. The intent is that patient does not get surprised and they do not get a bill. Now, I'm going to tell you something, make it even, if you want to be crazy, this will make you crazy. And every practitioner out there, including me, if I was still in private practice, would be going, you got to be freaking kidding me. You not only have to give them an estimate of your fees and charges, but if you routinely refer people out, let's say you were going to refer them out for an MRI scan, or you're going to refer them out for a massage, or you're going to refer them out for something else that you're still the controller of their case, you have to estimate those fees for them as well. Well, how are you going to know that, right? So at least one thing the government said was they're not going to issue fines for that piece of the law for 1 year to give doctors an opportunity to find out what the fee schedules are and what the people charge that they typically and routinely refer to. So this is why, we just said
this is a shock. This is coming as a shock. And I'm glad that I watched one of your video explanations of this before we started, so that I could get most of the shock out of my system, and my staff sat here shocked as well. Because here's the reality. Most of our members are probably doing some form of a care plan in their office. And when you do a care plan, yes, you outline you're going to need X number of visits over a certain amount of time, and your expected cost would be so and so. And if they have insurance, we may say that, your anticipated insurance participation will be XYZ. But now you're saying before they even come in for day one, we need to give them some information. And then at the report of findings, we not only have to go over it, we need to get it in writing and signed by the patient, which I'm assuming we need to keep a copy. They need to keep a copy. So that
you do to prove what you did.
Right. But then, like you said, if they don't respond to care, now we have to sit down. We can't just say, hey, let's do another visit this week. We would have to sit down and explain to them there's an additional cost to having more visits.
Correct. If it goes above whatever the original estimate was that you gave them. Now, could you sit down with a person and say, look, every time you come in, the fees are X, and here it is in writing. Here's my fee schedule. And here's what it's going to cost every time that you come to the office. And you're just going to show up when you want to show up. Well, they have some information about that. And basically, that's a special type of patient. That patient is called a periodic returning patient. And what you actually have to do on a periodic returning patient by the law is at the beginning of every visit, or actually 3 hours before they show for the visit to meet the law, you have to say, this visit will be $63. Here it is in writing, and sign off on it. That's what you're supposed to do under the law. Now,
isn't that what a credit card charge is? They know what they're signing off on, or that doesn't count?
If they're paying at every visit, then they're not going to accrue $400 or more as a bill and get a surprise bill. So again, your chance of ever having a problem and have them turn you in is low. But here's what happens in the compliance world. That's the problem. Let's say under HIPAA, for instance. Under HIPAA, every year I go to the Washington, D.C. Cybersecurity and HIPAA Symposium, 3 days of the enforcers that actually enforce HIPAA against you, talking about who they're after, how they catch them, what they do to them, the parts of the law they have changed by just executive order within their organization, the parts of the law that they are not enforcing and don't care about, and what they think is coming in the future. Now, being the fact that I teach for 43 state associations and 4 colleges, and I spend my life on the road going to associations and teaching for them relative to compliance, that's what I need to know. If I'm going to help protect you, that's exactly what I need to know. So let's take an example. Under HIPAA, every year they literally beat the table one year and say, doctors, there's nothing else we know to tell doctors except that they know they have to have a risk analysis, they have to have recent ICERs, and they have to have a full and total documented written policies in place for HIPAA, or they're in violation. We're going to fine them at the max if they have a problem. Well, there's probably a lot of people on the line right now don't know what a risk analysis is, much less have one, what an ICER is, much less have them done. But that's what you're required under law, and they state exactly what they're going to do to you. So if you've got them saying what they're going to do, here's what happens. Let's say you get in problem with HIPAA. And an investigation does not start because you did something wrong. An investigation starts because someone complained or just ask a question. If someone calls the Office of Civil Rights who enforces against you on HIPAA and just says, Dr. Talcott did this, is that okay? If they put my name, they have to investigate by law. Now, when they investigate, what they do is they demand things from you. So they'll say, send us a copy of your risk analysis. Send us a copy of your ICERs. Well, under the No Surprise Act, maybe you'll never have a complaint because no one ever has a $400 or greater bill that they get surprised with. But let's say someone complains that you didn't release their records when they requested them on a timely basis. And now they're investigating. And when they're investigating, they say, well, did the patient pay for their services? Do they have any unexpected fees? And you say no. And they say, okay, well, send us a copy of your compliance program for the No Surprises Act. So you can't just say, okay, well, that'll never happen with a $400 surprise bill. So I'll never have a complaint against me. So I won't even bother with putting in what I need to put in for this program. No, they may still request or require you send them information about how you've complied with this program under another unrelated issue. And if you can't provide that, then they find, of course, you're not compliant. And at that point, this particular one can be up to $10,000 fine per line item.
So my brain is instantly trying to relate this to something that people who don't understand all the words that you just said, because there's a lot that if I don't do compliance for, a day-to-day basis, then I don't understand a lot of what you said. It's almost like how they could pull you over for a tail light out, but then they can inspect the rest of your car because they have probable cause. So this is their avenue to get in. So if there's any complaint whatsoever, they can investigate this No Surprises Act.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Now, can I ask you a question? Because I know we have a lot of members that are watching that see patients who have been involved in a car accident. And typically when they're handling car accident cases, motor vehicle accident cases, they're going to submit a bill to the insurance company or to the third party payer or to the attorney. What happens when that bill doesn't get paid and the chiropractor then has to turn around and send a bill to the patient that they were expecting another payer to take care of?
It's a great question. What do you do with an attorney lien? If you're filing on the patient's PIP on their own insurance, then they're not cash and they have not decided to not use their insurance and pay cash instead. They don't fall under this law then at this point. The question, though, which is a great question, what happens when you have a lien with an attorney and that patient says in the lien they sign, if the attorney doesn't pay, you're saying to them, you're responsible for the bill. Now, all of a sudden they get a $2,500 bill, 6 months from now, and they go, I didn't expect this. I didn't think I was going to have to pay this. I didn't think this bill was coming. Most federal laws are suspended for PI and work comp. PI and work comp are typically regulated under state law. So there's an argument to be made that anything PI related is actually outside of this law. However, there's another argument that the patient might make saying, I don't care, it was a surprise bill and I'm going to turn you in. And now you get to, again, show them that you're compliant, doing the right things. And there's several lawsuits against this act already. So it's all going to morph and change.
Right,
okay.
Of course.
I don't know what it'll end up being. So what I'm recommending right now to doctors who have a PI case where they're accepting a lien is that they go ahead and actually outline to that patient, just like they would a new patient that was cash. They just say to them, look, we're anticipating X number of treatments with X number of cost, have them sign off on that written so that they understand, and they understand that if the lien is not honored for any reason or the case goes south, that they're going to owe the bill, and have them sign off on that. And that'll cover you the best we can. Remember that, I'm not an attorney, but I represent doctors to the government constantly. I get 2 to 4 chiropractors a month calling me that are either under investigation by the federal government or under audit by the federal government for a compliance issue, or they know they've had a breach of information or something that's going to be a major problem. And so I act as an intermediary. And so far since 2010, we have gotten every chiropractor out of fines. We have done it successfully. The difference, if you have a full program in place and everything that you need to be as compliant as possible, and you get in trouble and you have me be an intermediary to help you, in most cases, 3 to 4 weeks, we have a closed case with no costs involved. That's pretty good, timing, and it's pretty good on cost. Difference. I still can get you out of trouble usually, even if you've done it wrong and you don't have the stuff in place. So far, we've been 100% at it. But the difference, it usually takes 11 to 18 months, and the cost is typically somewhere $30,000 to $80,000. And none of that's coming to me. That's because the government starts demanding things. And when you have them, we just send them, and pretty soon, boom, case closed. When you don't have them, then what they do is they mandate things you have to produce to them within 7 days or 10 days. We can't get that stuff done in 7 days. We have to hire outside professionals to come in for $5,000, $10,000 for this. Well, then you give that to the government and they say, well, now here's what we need. And you got to have that in 10 days. Now there goes another $5,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 or $12,000. And by the time you get done, the whole time it's hanging over your head. You don't know what your fines are going to be, if you're going to be fined out of existence, and you end up just spending money crazy. So it always pays to have your programs in place, have them exactly right, as good as they can be. Then you have what we call a defensible position. And when you have a defensible position, it means that even though you did something wrong, even though there's a problem, we can defend that to the government, and they'll end up agreeing that, yes, you mostly did what you're supposed to do. In the future, slap, slap, do this, and there won't be a fine involved. So it kind of really takes us into the next topic we were going to talk about.
Well, what I do want to say is basically what you're saying is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
And we're the profession of prevention.
Right.
We should understand.
Right. So why not set our offices up to make sure that we're protected? I do want to go backwards to one of the things that you said, because in Georgia, we do not have a lien law. So if you're a new doc that's watching this, or a new graduate and you're not aware of that, Georgia doesn't have a lien law. So an attorney can agree to honor your lien, but the insurance companies do not have to. However, we are very fortunate in the state of Georgia, and not a lot of chiropractors know this, that the attorneys are bound by their own rules, Bar Rule 1.15, which says if they know that there's a bill due payable to a chiropractor and they cut the check to the patient and don't pay you, they could lose their license. So we are a little bit protected in that regard, even though we don't have a lien law. But I just wanted to throw that out there, because I know when we start talking about any kind of money and car accidents and what could happen if we don't meet this No Surprises Act with car accident, I just wanted some of our docs to know that there is some protection. And if you ever run into that situation, just reach out to GCC. We can get you that. But right now, we definitely have to talk about that safe harbor law, because this is another
comment on what you just said there. Another reason why documentation is so critical. You need to document to that attorney that, yes, there is a lien. You need to get them to sign that lien. You need to make sure they are aware of, you don't just have the patient sign the lien in your office and don't have the attorney involved in that process. Otherwise, they'll say, well, we didn't know there was a lien involved at all. And, if you don't have it documented, you don't have anything to stand on. But the next topic we were going to move into are what are called the HIPAA Safe Harbor Law. And this is really important because of this whole attitude and idea of being prepared ahead of time. They're under HIPAA, they have stated and said all along, there will never be a safe harbor for HIPAA. In other words, there's never certain things you can do, and then you'll be protected against fines, no get out of jail free cards, etc. Well, that was true until Trump came along. And Trump doesn't like regulations, and he didn't like this stuff. He thought it was too hard on the doctors. It was unfair. They couldn't know some of these things. They were being treated unfairly. And so last January, not this January, a year ago, before he left office, he put into effect what is not even called the Safe Harbor Law, but it's referred to in Washington, D.C. and all around as the HIPAA Safe Harbor Law. And what it says is that if you will implement into your office certain known best practices for cybersecurity, because see, HIPAA is cybersecurity. HIPAA equals healthcare cybersecurity. That's why you're hearing so much about HIPAA now, and you didn't in the past, is because all of the rules that regulate what you have to do with your computers and what you have to do to protect the information electronically and all that, that's all under HIPAA. And so that whole world has blown up with ransomware attacks and all the different things that happen that are just horrible. Well, every time that happens to you, if it happens successfully, like a ransomware attack, and they get your data, it's a HIPAA violation against you. Because if you have a HIPAA program in place that's appropriate, that can't happen to you. So what Trump did, he came along and said, look,
I got an issue with that, because that's not necessarily the case. They get through a firewall and they get right into everything.
If you do everything under HIPAA, including have increased malware that protects against ransomware, which is required under HIPAA, if you do everything under HIPAA, the government, and then your ransomware attacks successfully, they get your data. Right. The government says it's an automatic HIPAA violation from you being non-compliant. And there's only one exception to that. And that is if you can prove that you did everything you were supposed to do and they still got through, which can, to your point, it can happen, but it's very unlikely to happen. In fact, one of your guys who works with you, Lee, with ChiroSafe, he's really good at helping people make sure their computers are protected. And he'll tell you the same thing because he understands the HIPAA law very well. And he's very good at working with everybody, on that. And you've got to stay safe from that. And I have not had a chiropractor yet that could prove to the government that it wasn't their fault. In other words, they had a ransomware attack. If you can prove to the government, I did everything and it wasn't my fault, and they will let you off the hook for the fine. Hadn't happened yet. Okay, we haven't had a single doctor that's been able to prove. It's always because they were deficient and didn't do something they were supposed to do. So what Trump said was, kind of with your reaction, hey, things can still happen. These doctors are doctors. They're not hospitals that have full-time IT people, who this happens to more than regular doctors, by the way, or even the people with full-time IT. So he said, here's the deal. If the doctor can show and document, always the big word, document,
right,
they've implemented certain protections that are known best practices for cyber protection, and if they can show that they have initiated some of the policies for keeping staff under control, doing the right thing so they don't make errors, then if they do that and they do it consistently for 12 months, then if they have a complaint against them or an investigation, they will get 3 advantages. Number 1, the audit or investigation will be limited in its time and scope, done faster. It will be limited in its breadth, how far they investigate, and they will not have fines issued against them. That's a pretty close to a safe harbor. Now, if you do something criminal or you do something that's a conspiracy with something else to defraud, it still is not a get out of jail totally free, but they call it the safe harbor because you're going to be given those preferential treatment status. Now, the reason I wanted to bring that up today and wanted to be that one of our topics, you have to have been doing that for 12 months, which means as of today, this January, the doctors who took action 12 months ago and did what they could do, they're in a safe zone now to where any complaint that comes against them anytime in their past, back 6 years, that's how far they can go back, they are protected now under these new protections. So the question becomes, how long do you want to wait before you start getting these things in place? The other thing is, once you've got them in place, you're actually protected at that point for anything that would happen from that day forward. Okay, but going backwards, you're not until you've been doing it for 12 months.
So Dr. Ty, what are some of the things that people need to put in place today?
And that's a big question. Okay, right. Here's what I recommend to people. If you have a complete and total HIPAA program in place, in other words, if you don't have one and you install it, or you have a deficient one and you install one that's complete, or you've got one but you haven't, there's about 12 reviews, evaluations, and self-audits you have to do every single year, year after year after year, or you're not current and compliant. And the problem with that is if you initiate a program that's a proper one, it will tell you on each section of that program when you're required to either reevaluate it, re-review it. That means documented reevaluation, documented re-review, or documented self-audit. If you don't do it, you knew because you installed a program that you needed to do it. You didn't do it under HIPAA. That's called willful neglect. You knew it and didn't do it. It's a $59,255 minimum fine. So you need to have the program in place. You need to keep it current. Now, if you do that, if you do it with our programs, at least, our programs we know already incorporate those safe harbors. So if you just install and run a program like you're supposed to anyway, but you do it with one that the person heading up the program knows what those safe harbors are and has included it in their program in the last year, it's got to be an update to the program. Okay. Program that's 3 years old, 5 years old is no good. Okay. It's not going to, it helps, but it's not going to protect you the way something that's updated will. So my best and easiest recommendation is instead of trying to break down the granular of all the safe harbor things, because there's a NIST, National Institute of Technological Standards. There's a NIST document that has all the things you're talking about, all the cyber security things you're supposed to do. We've included all that into the program, because trying to take a program and then add all those things to it, that'll make you crazy too. But I can tell you some of the things that under the new stuff you have to do. I think the most important is that you have to have a current and updated risk analysis, which again is just part of the law. It's part of a standard program. But see what Trump was thinking. Okay, what Trump was thinking is most of the doctors are in the state that I know they're in, which is they're not even close. They don't have half the stuff they're supposed to already have.
Right.
So he kind of backed up and said, look, it's almost like he said, if you at least have in a chiropractor's office, there's about 100 pages of documented policies, written, formalized, documented policies it takes to meet the standards for policies. And what do you say? If you at least have the written documented policies that are necessary for your practice, and you have done a risk analysis, and you are checking to see if your data is being stolen from your computers without your knowledge, which happens all the time. There's somebody on the line right now, it's happening to them.
Right.
And if you also will do certain things for cyber, such as have upgraded encryption software, have software that is upgraded for malware to protect against all the way up to ransomware and stronger, more severe attacks. If you have these, you kind of check off the list. If you've done those, and he's really kind of even saying, even if you don't have a complete and total program, but you've done those, you meet the safe harbor. So I guess the point is, if you put in a really good program and you keep it current appropriately, you're actually going to be at or above those safe harbor rules already. So that's the easiest way. It's like trying to take an old car that everything on it is broken and fix just the engine, but not the transmission, and say, I think I'll go with that and see if it works. Instead,
but I want to ask you a question, because it's not just the people that have the old car. There's a lot of people who've been in practice for a very long time. A lot of docs in Georgia, a lot of our members have been in practice for a very long time. And there's a lot of doctors who may be under the impression that if they're a cash office, or if they don't bill electronically, or if they're out of network and they submit everything by mail, that they don't have to be HIPAA compliant.
Well, this gets to be a real touchy thing. Under HIPAA, there's a lot of things that make you a HIPAA covered entity. If you file insurance electronically, you are for sure under HIPAA. I mean, that's just a given. However, what if you don't file insurance electronically, but you have a computer in your office? Are you still under HIPAA? Well, then it becomes maybe. If you're transferring any records through that computer, you're still a covered entity under HIPAA. If you are helping people, if you're using your computer in your office to help people verify their benefits, even if you don't accept insurance, but you're trying to see if you're going to give them a super bill or something, they're going to file their own, and you help them by verifying benefit, you're under HIPAA. In other words, there's a lot of things that pull you back into HIPAA if you've got a computer in that office. Now, HIPAA also protects privacy for paper as well as electronic. Now, if you truly have an office that has no computers in it, everything is paper, everything is cash, you might not be a covered entity under HIPAA. You might not have to abide by all the HIPAA laws. However, here's the problem. All states have laws that require physicians to protect their private information, whether you're under HIPAA or not. So what happens is a patient complains against you to the federal government. They come back to that patient, because you won't know if you're a HIPAA entity until you're in trouble. You can't submit to the government and say, am I a covered entity or not? They will say, yeah, go away. That's not our job. You have to decide that. You talk to your attorneys to decide that. So now somebody complains, government turns around and says, well, that doctor's not a HIPAA covered entity, so we have no jurisdiction. So now what does the patient do? They sue you, because there's still laws that cover it. So they sue you. Now you're on the witness stand. And they say, well, doctor, so what did you do to protect the patient's information? And you say, X, Y, Z. And they say, you think that's the state of the art? You go, absolutely. And then they put 100 doctors in a row on the witness stand and say, what's the state of art for patient protection? HIPAA, 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 HIPAA. Now, I don't like to see a doctor in that position, in that posture. I'd rather see him go on the witness stand and somebody says, what'd you do to protect the patient? I followed HIPAA rules and I don't have to. I'm not even required to, but I did it anyway. And it's an easy HIPAA program to put in for somebody when they don't have any electronics. I mean, it's not as near as big a deal to do. And now they've got they are following the state of the art, even though they don't have to. Boy, that's a defensible position. So I actually recommend to people that think maybe they don't even have to have a HIPAA program, that they go ahead and do it. It'll be much easier than most people have to deal with to do it, and they'll have the best protection they can have. And that really segues us into the last topic really nicely.
Right. And that's what I was just going to ask you, because this sounds like a lot of work for the average chiropractor who is busy trying to run a practice, raise a family, take care of their staff, train their staff, do all the things that we have to do to run a practice and have a lifestyle as well. This sounds like a lot to learn, and it might not necessarily be the type of information that they want to spend their weekend learning and implementing on their own.
I had the first $1 million chiropractic practice. It This was a long, long time ago when pterodactyls flew the earth and there were stone tires on cars. We ultimately ended up almost at the 2 million mark. I averaged 160 visits a day for 18 of 20 years I was in practice, some days over 200 a day. I know how chaotic it is to interrupt a practice, to have to try to figure this stuff out. I do this all day long and cannot stay on top of it. I have people in the field constantly contacting me saying, hey, I had this problem. Did you hear about this? I go, oh man, this lawsuit against the No Surprises Act just came out and here was the decision. And they find out somehow before I find out. And now next thing you know, I do this all day long and can't totally stay on top of it. I get that. And so we try to make everything as easy as we can for the doctors. It is a lot of work, but you got to come into this century. Especially if you got a computer in the office, you got to come into this century because the government has now announced they're going to start doing random audits. No complaint needed. They're just going to contact you and say, send me a copy of your risk analysis. Send me a copy of your breach notification policy. Send me a copy of your contingency plan with data recovery and emergency mode operation. These things are all required under HIPAA. So one of the things that we've done at your council, the Georgia Council, is we have teamed up to create what's called the compliance desk. And the compliance desk is a member benefit for GCC members. And I'm just really happy that Georgia asked me to help supply a lot of the content for the compliance desk. And so my involvement in the compliance desk for members is that I have tons of white papers. I have tons of pre-recorded webinars. I'm also available by phone or email to answer any questions of a GCC member. There's no charge for any of this stuff to do, okay, at all. And the compliance desk is set up by your association to provide answers. And the way it works, and I love the design of this thing, is let's say a person who's listening today they're under investigation. Well, if they go to the compliance desk, which is part of your website, your benefit, if they're a member and they go to the desk, there'll be basically a click bar there that will say, help, I'm under investigation. Okay. If they're concerned they're not compliant enough, what we were talking about how do you stay on top of this? Well, people who know what they're doing with it are on top of it, but others aren't, and the majority aren't. So you might say, well, I just don't know if I'm compliant or not. Well, there'll be a click bar at the compliance desk that says, hey, I'm not sure if I'm compliant. What do I need to know? And then there'll be a click bar, I'm in trouble and I need to talk to somebody. Well, then you're going to come through to me. And one of the biggest problems with being in trouble is there's certain things you don't say. I need to talk to you before you talk to the government in any form or fashion, email them or talk to them, because I spend more time undoing when you step in the doo-doo than I do trying to get you out of the problem. Okay. So there's things you need to do immediately. There's things you need to not do immediately. But all of that will be, if you have an issue of concern, if you go to the compliance desk, it'll be click bars that outline those. I need my staff educated. I'm not sure if I'm doing the annual training that's required correctly. You just go to the compliance desk, click on what your concern is, and it's going to take you directly to short videos that are 5 minutes or less that will just bottom line it. And then those videos will tell you where you can get more information from a full webinar, or where you can get a white paper, or if it passes through to me because there's something that's more emergency or whatever. So the desk has been set up really nicely, and it's going to be a real nice member benefit. And so I'm excited for Georgia for setting that up, and I'm excited to be the consultant to the desk to try to provide the opportunity, the materials that are there. So that's a really cool member benefit.
It really is, and I think it's very timely because, like you said, it's new year. It's time to get into this decade, this century, and a lot of people have been under the impression of old rules, old laws that they remember from 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or somebody taught them that way when they started practicing, and that's what they're conducting their business under now. And now it's really time to pay attention. So docs, I want you to check out the website, georgiachiropractic.org. And I want you to check out the compliance help desk, because that is one of your great member benefits that we're really happy to be able to present to you. We're really thankful for Dr. Ty for not only providing the information today, but providing all this information for that help desk so that you can stay compliant and so that your office can do what you do best, which is detect and correct vertebral subluxations and know that everything else is handled properly. that's our job here at the GCC. We want to make it where you can get your hands on more people and do the best job that you can do to take care of them and let everything else run smoothly for you in the background.
We did not go to school to be compliance officers and documenters. We went to school to play with chiropractic miracles. So let's just keep people in a position where they can do that. And yes, it is tough, but once you get it in place, it is doable. We do it constantly. It is doable. It's tough, but doable. Once it's in place, then you can just sleep at night and forget about it for the most part, because you'll have a defensible position. If you do happen to have a problem, it'll be easily solved.
Fantastic. I know your information has been up on the screen throughout the entire duration of this, but just one more time, I know that it's going to go back up on the screen so that people can see it. There it is right there. So you can reach Dr. Ty Talcott at Dr. Ty, the compliance guy. I love it. It's like Bill Nye, the science guy. We got Dr. Ty, thecomplianceguy.com. If you have any other questions, please reach out to him. Put your comments below in this video, or reach out to our executive director, Katrina Frazier, and she will connect the dots for you. We want to thank you so much, Dr. Ty, for joining us and sharing all this information today.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on, and I've done a lot of live events for you all, and I'm looking forward to doing more live events in the future as well.
Definitely. Absolutely. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's edition of the Georgia Chiro Connection. We've got a special edition coming up tomorrow. So this week we're actually hitting you twice, and we will be with our new president, Dr. Dan, too. So check us out tomorrow, which is Thursday at 1:30. And we look forward to seeing you again at Georgia's Chiro Connection, your site to learn everything that you need to be happy, healthy in practice, and to stay compliant and to keep your practice growing, expanding, and enabling you to reach the masses. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.